Hello and welcome to our special live coverage of the welcoming ceremony ahead of the summit between South Korea and the United Arab Emirates, as President Lee Jae-myung makes a state visit to the country. In just a few moments, President Lee will sit down for talks with the UAE leader at the presidential palace, where they're expected to discuss issues ranging from defense cooperation to artificial intelligence. Now, the president arrived in the United Arab Emirates on Monday, kicking off his four-nation trip to the Middle East and Africa. So while we wait for the welcoming ceremony to begin, here in the studio today, we have Mohamed Gura, a professor of Middle Eastern Studies at Hankuk University of Foreign Studies. Welcome to the studio.
Happy to be here. Thank you.
I also have today Song Soo-young, professor at the College of Business and Economics at Chungang University. Thanks for coming in today.
Yeah. Thank you for inviting me.
Thank you. So, Professor Good, I want to start with you. So this is President Lee Jae-myung's first trip to the Middle East since taking office. What do you think he hopes to achieve diplomatically through this visit?
I think there are many things that President Lee is thinking about right now. He's thinking mainly about, of course, securing energy reserves or energy supply to Korea. We have to remember that 70 to 75% of Koreans' imports from oil comes from the Middle East. This is a very important thing. We have also to remember that Korea's biggest arms deal in history of Korea happened under the President Moon's administration with the UAE of $3.5 billion. We have to also remember that UAE is the only country in the region with special strategic partnership with Korea. So this involves sustainability, AI, defense, and many other things, actually, even startups and SMEs. So I think President Lee is aiming to gain more foothold when it comes to Middle East, and also to, I think, support Korea's role as a key player in the Middle East. This is part of his ideology of pragmatic leadership and pragmatic goals in the Middle East. So I think we have multifaceted goals happening here, and I think we have to wait and see what will happen. It's very interesting what's happening right now.
Right, absolutely. A lot of issues to discuss there.
Sure.
And Professor Song, what about on the economic side? What are some key areas of cooperation to watch while he's in the Middle East?
Of course, Professor Kuda has already mentioned that the whole UAE could be a kind of toehold for South Korean economy to have some economic relationship strengthening between Korea and UAE. Clearly, the areas of focus of attention is artificial intelligence and related areas such as arms and armaments and weaponry. And in addition to that, I believe some kind of, Professor Kuda already mentioned, the small and medium enterprises have a chance to go to the UAE and expand their business activities throughout the Middle East. And of course, UAE has very strong demands and needs to establish their own defense system. All they have is just oil and the natural resources of energy. But across the Gulf of Arabia, Iran is out there. Therefore, UAE is very concerned about their security and the safety and the defense. Therefore, we have a very big room for mutual winning and win-win for both countries. So to that regard, economic cooperation is very promising in the near future.
Absolutely, indeed. And Professor Gura, I understand that, like you mentioned, UAE is the only Middle Eastern country that has specific strategic partnership with South Korea. Could you tell us more about what this means, and how would you describe South Korea's bilateral relationship with the UAE so far?
I think it's excellent. What I usually try to do as an Egyptian, as a guy who can read also Arabic and so on, is to read the news from the Arabic sources regarding Korean president visit to the Middle East and so on. And I think the UAE press this morning was really, have been jubilating and very happy about this visit. And they're all talking, like what Professor Song have mentioned, about the strategic relationship, about the arms trade, about the AI, about SMEs. Right. So there are so many things. Just to mention some numbers here, we have to remember that non-oil trade between UAE and Korea reached around $6.6 billion last year, up 11% from the previous year. UAE has pledged to invest $30 billion in strategic investment in Korea across hydrogen, aerospace, semiconductors, and AI. So definitely UAE is really interested in Korea as a real partner and real strategic partner when it comes to those kind of things. And UAE, of course, is moving very fast. I think, in my opinion, it's one of the most fastest moving countries in the Middle East when it comes to its economic goals and achieving its strategic goals. So I think this is good news for everybody.
Right, absolutely. And so what will the administration hope to achieve by meeting the UAE leader? We'll see just a moment President Lee Jae-myung holding a summit with the UAE leader. So what can we expect there?
Well, to be honest, we can expect two things. We can expect more of the same, when it comes to, President Moon's and then President Yoon's and then now President Lee. We expect more of the same strategy when it comes to Korea, more involvement when it comes to trade and economic strategy with the Middle East and with UAE especially. So we expect this. And I expect also President Lee to perhaps be pragmatic, as he's always talking about pragmatism, which I really like as an economist. And I think he will try to push further this cooperation through AI and through aerospace and through defense. So I think this will be very interesting, and I think maybe even more than we expect will happen. Maybe it can happen at the conference, which will happen maybe right now in UAE.
Right, absolutely. Right, so it seems President Lee is heading to the venue, the presidential palace where the summit will be held. So while we still wait for that, Professor Song, defense cooperation is expected to top the agenda, as you mentioned, when the two leaders meet, right? So is there potential for some meaningful progress in arms exports with the UAE and perhaps other Middle Eastern nations, as he's also expected to go to Egypt and Turkey?
Sure.
So what do you expect? Do you expect there to be any potential for meaningful progress in arms exports?
First, as for the relationship between the South Korea and the UAE, as Professor Guda has mentioned in detail, but I would like to go further, is the areas of energy, such as electricity, because particularly nuclear power plant would be of the attention. And right now, and clearly the UAE is very in short term, they need some kind of armaments and weaponries, and bomb shells or some defense system is needed. But in the relatively medium or long run, actually they need some kind of the usage of AI is they must have a data center to make the most of the large language model in UAE and to secure. So that's why they need both the AI and simultaneously the defense system. And also you have mentioned this is the first leg, and the second leg is Egypt, and then go to Johannesburg in South Africa, and then come back to Turkey. So overall, I guess the President Lee's goal is to expand our diplomatic and economic, even though economic values may not be as big as during his visit to South Africa, and because overall African countries currently, most of them are developing countries. But however, I believe there is a chance to have some cooperation and mutually beneficially developing the economies, particularly about the blue carbon credit issues, because among the African countries, they have a huge mangrove. So that is a source of the blue carbon credit. And in addition to that, diplomatically, we could have some kind of some expanding power and cooperation. And then Egypt, maybe, because Egypt has a huge population and is a strategically very important country for expanding for the South Korean economic cooperation, expanding to North Africa, such as Morocco and Algeria and Libya, Tunisia is so-called the North African countries are actually, they are Europeans equivalent because they all belong in the past Roman Empire, right? Therefore, to that regard, we should differentiate the treatment between, even in Africa. So, finally, Turkey is kind of competing country between South Korea and Turkey, but Turkey plays a very important role and a crucial key role link between Europe and the Middle East. So I think overall, this visit overall is a very important and a very timely visit economically, politically, diplomatically.
Right, absolutely. And speaking of Egypt, as he will be heading to Egypt after he wraps up his trip in the UAE, Egypt is another critical trading partner for South Korea, right?
Yes, definitely.
Right.
Especially when it comes to defense, also industry and so on. One major topic that will be, I think, discussed with President Sisi of Egypt will be the domestication of technology, of Korean technology when it comes to defense in Egypt. And this will be very interesting because, of course, President Sisi have been talking about this for many years.
Right.
And we will have to see what will happen. It will be very interesting. And also, President Lee will give a speech from Cairo University also when he visits Egypt, so establishing his Middle East initiative and strategy. So it will be very interesting also to see what will happen.
Right, right. It seems the president is now entering the venue of the summit, the presidential palace in the UAE, greeted by the UAE delegation. So going back to, President Lee Jae-myung is now at the UAE presidential palace. We see that on the screen. We also see him being greeted by fighter jets. So he's now at the presidential palace for the summit. So going back to the arms exports issue, Professor Gura, what's your take on this issue and South Korea's defense cooperation with the Middle Eastern countries?
Sure. Actually, the scale of Koreans' exports of military and of weapons is really impressive. We have to remember, I will just mention some numbers here. So Korea's defense exports orders jumped from $3 billion in 2020 to $7.3 billion in 2021 to $17.3 in 2022. So this is a huge increase, and it's roughly around $14 billion in 2023. So Korea is really gaining momentum when it comes to exports of weapons and so on. So and Korea is aiming to be the fourth largest defense power by 2030. On the other side, the Middle East is having imports of around 27 to 30% of the global arms around the world. So this is a very big market. However, I have to mention one thing. We have to look also from a macro perspective. We have to see that the Middle East nowadays is being reshaped, with the conflict. That's what's happening between Israel and Hamas, and in Sudan and in Libya. So it's in a state of flux. So I think there will be a huge push for militarization all over the Middle East. And I think President Lee is trying to also use this push, this demand for weapons right now. I mean, from one side, the Middle East is pushing for militarization. On the other hand, yesterday we have been having reports that Mohammed bin Salman, the Crown Prince of Saudi Arabia, is visiting U.S. and talking about peace with Israel. There are some talks. So it's mixed. We have mixed signals, actually. So I think Korean president is very smart to be visiting the Middle East at this stage and at this critical moment in the history of the Middle East.
Right, and as we speak, we see President Lee Jae-myung shaking hands with the UAE leader, and so they will be holding a summit any moment now. So, Professor Gura, like you mentioned, South Korea has already exported a lot of weapons to the Middle East, right? Like the Cheonggung-2 missile and K9 howitzers. So, what makes Korean defense systems so appealing to countries like this in the region?
Okay, I will be frank and I will talk about the good things, and I will mention some critical things that maybe the Korean side has to consider. The good things is that South Korea exports, it's very cost effective. The weapons are very reliable. They are cost effective. They are very good. The quality is very, very good. They have proven, they have record proven of performance and of strong partnerships when it comes to its deployment in the Middle East. Also flexibility and customization. South Korea's exports are customized to its partners when it comes to selling of weapons and so on. Also, there is this sort of no strings attached with the weapons. Unlike what's happening with the European countries or with the US, South Korea is very pragmatic. And this is, I think, from my perspective, very good. I mean, economically speaking, this is good news that it's very pragmatic. However, one thing that I think South Koreans need to consider, and this has been mentioned a couple of times in the Arab media, it's that South Korea is cooperating with Israel when it comes to technology and AI, when it comes to weapons. And some Arab countries do not really like this. Right. They are not really sure that they will be secure, the weapons will be secure. So we need to see how South Koreans will really, hold up when it comes to this kind of trade and so on. But I'm sure this can be handled well by Koreans and even in the short run.
Okay. Right. So, and as we speak, he was greeted by children at the UAE presidential palace. So we see both the president, Lee Jae-myung, and the UAE president walking side by side, ready to hold a summit anytime soon.
It's the national anthem of Korea.
Right.
حرس جاهز للتفتيش سيدي.
So, Professor Song, continuing with our discussion on the defense exports, how important is the Middle East within South Korea's overall defense export market?
A moment ago, the Professor Kuda has mentioned the surge of the Korean exports in terms of weapon to the Middle East is the other neighbors' tragedy may turn out to be a benefit to our country. So to that regard, I'm sorry about that because of the war has been continued in Middle East. That's why we have enjoyed the kind of benefit of increasing export of weaponry. But so as the peace should be settled in Middle East, and therefore then that kind of weaponry demand may be reduced. But the Middle East countries, they need some kind of upgraded defense system. So to that regards, AI-related and the semiconductor or digital technology-related demand may continue in other side, different aspect of the weapon and the armament system. Therefore, Korean defense industry, they must be adapted to the evolving situation in Middle East. They should not just take for granted some kind of this continuous, very worrying situation in Middle East. And also, I would like to mention that the South Korean economy should not be regarded as a kind of some opportunistic to take advantage of the situation. And I really hope the Israel and Palestine and the Middle East, they have achieved some kind of peace settlement. Then we may have a chance to increase in other exports of the other products such as cars and other types of some kind of express trains and other areas of exports could be expanded. So to that regard, the UAE is a kind of, I have known UAE is very famous for some making agreement with economic partnership for the several countries around the world. So the choice of UAE is very good, but South Korea, but before that, this kind of economic cooperation agreement is just a bilateral agreement. So it is distinguished from the multilateral, which has been abandoned by Donald Trump. So I think plurilateralism, that kind of a trade, regional trade agreement among the region and the bilateral may prevails future shape of the economic situation. So we must be prepared and adjust our economy according to that.
Right. Do you have anything to add to that?
Yeah, I totally agree. I mean, with Professor Song, I mean, we all hope in the Middle East that we have peace. Unfortunately, although now we seem to have some sort of a pause, but unfortunately, the signs are also not very jubilating, you know. I just hope also, like you, I just hope for more peace. Actually, if we have more peace, we have more room for Korean industry and for Korean trade in the Middle East, you know. But the thing is, we still have many problems with Israel, with Iran, with Lebanon, with Hezbollah, with Libya, with Sudan. So I sincerely hope we have better news, but it seems we will, at least in the short run, will still suffer a little bit in the Middle East when it comes to conflict, unfortunately.
Right. We'll have to wait and see. So President Lee Jae-myung just shook hands with the UAE delegation, and you see on the screen the UAE president now shaking hands, exchanging greetings with the Korean delegation. So, Professor Guda, like you mentioned, the Lee administration has been emphasizing what it calls pragmatic diplomacy, right? And focusing on national interests. Do you expect that to see this approach to be reflected during his trip?
Yeah, totally. I think President Lee is very smart that he's following this pragmatic approach. To be honest, at the beginning, I was really not sure. Since we have the martial law issue and so on, that President Lee will not think about economics so much, will be maybe thinking about other topics. But now I can see that economics is one big focus of President Lee's administration and cabinet, and this is great. I think we all need economic development in the Middle East and in Korea. This is something that it's not a luxury anymore. So I think this approach is very good. I think what President Lee is trying to do is very good. I hope more can be done, because up till now, the information we're getting, we're talking, as what Professor Song have mentioned, we are talking about more or less 5 or 6 topics. But I think the expansion of partnership with the Middle East can be more than that when it comes to education, when it comes to culture. And we will talk about that later, definitely. But there are more things that we can also do when it comes to Korea and the Middle East.
Right.
Yeah. Right. And Professor Song, we just saw the welcoming ceremony ahead of the summit, and President Lee Jae-myung also said earlier that under the new comprehensive economic partnership agreement with the UAE, tariffs are set to be eliminated on more than 90% of traded items. Could you tell us more about the implications of this agreement and what this means for Korean businesses.
Yeah, I had mentioned a little bit about the comprehensive economic partnership agreement and or comprehensive economic cooperation agreement. So UAE has achieved several such bilateral agreements. And this is for South Korea. I believe that this is next or second, because in 2009, South Korea has held some economic cooperation partnership with India in 2009. So this is a second time, and also this has been supported and by some kind of K Expo, which was held in UAE right now. So not only some cultural approach and but also some political and also economic, because when we just focus on the economic issues too much, that we may have a backfire. So as Professor Guda has mentioned, that because of eventually the Middle Eastern countries, they need peace and they need some kind of economic program to support their own people, take care of them. They cannot just discard those people who have suffered so much from the war that has been devastated, for particularly Iraq and Israel, Palestine, and Lebanon. Therefore, in that part could be another some chance for South Korea to expand political ties and economic ties, and then we could have a very strong, reliable, stable some foundation on which our trade and economic cooperation to be extended to all the MENA, Middle East and the North African areas. So to that regard, I believe this is a very momentum, very important. And considering the comparison before the martial law, as Professor Guda mentioned, as what a contrast.
Right, indeed. And Professor Guda, before I let you go, so now that the welcoming ceremony is over, the two presidents will now sit down for talks at the presidential palace. And another issue that they'll discuss is ways to expand cultural cooperation with the UAE. We just saw the President Lee Jae-myung being greeted with the UAE traditional performance. So how is Korean culture viewed in Middle Eastern countries?
Well, I have to say it's really gaining momentum. To the extent that even on personal note, my family members and the young kids in our family, when we go back to Egypt, they're crazy about K-pop and K-drama and so on. When I first came to Korea 11 years ago, this was not the case. Nowadays it's really gaining momentum.
So much has changed.
And actually, many people in the Middle East are considering Korea to come and have education here. We have to really think about that, because, as we all know, Korean education system, especially when it comes to universities, they suffer because of the lack of demographic issue and so on. So South Korea nowadays only takes around 3% only of Arab students studying abroad. I think there is room to improve this, and there is room to have more of those people, because actually the image of South Korea is very positive, and it's a very safe country. We don't have lots of races, we don't have lots of problems here. So I don't know why, to be honest, I don't know why South Korean government is still not making more moves towards this end goal. I think there is huge potential. I will be more than happy to hear from South Koreans about this aspect in the near future, hopefully.
I see. All right, Professor Guda, I'm afraid that's all the time we have for today. Thank you so much for coming in.
Thank you.
Professor Song, thank you so much for coming in to studio.
Yeah, my pleasure.
So now that ends our special live coverage of President Lee Jae-myung's state visit and the welcoming ceremony ahead of his summit with his UAE counterpart. Thank you for watching. We'll be back at 5 p.m. Korea time with our 5 p.m. edition of Arirang News. Thank you for watching.